So you are wanting to slow travel, you're wanting to go someplace and immerse yourself in the culture, the location. How do you choose where that special location is going to be? So I'm gonna let you know what I do, but the underlying principle for myself is at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I choose a country or a city or a region that ultimately I hate or that ultimately turns out to be a negative experience, because what I'm really doing is learning a new culture. There's an element of learning that guarantees it's a positive experience. If I'm learning about this location, it is automatically a positive. Whether I agree with the culture's philosophies or underlying values is irrelevant. It is the learning, it is the experience that I enjoy. And so to a certain effect, it really doesn't matter where I go. But of course, that leaves you with this entire planet of locations to go, and we need to narrow it down some way. So these are the considerations I take when choosing my next location, which I've recently done, and therefore seemed like a topical time to let you know what they are. So the first consideration is whether I feel like I'm done with my current country/location. Right now I'm in Merida, Mexico. I've been here a year and a half, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my time here. When I first got here, I really thought that I wouldn't last a year. Now granted, being locked up during a pandemic helped with the longevity, but now I'm starting to think that there's so much more to Mexico than I ever expected. I've traveled to multiple countries with the Navy/my family, and while it wasn't the same preconceived notions that maybe an average American who's never traveled may have, I still had a preconceived notion that in Merida I would find enough of a sampling of the entire country that it would be enough. So what I will say is, after a year and a half, I do feel like I'm ready to move on from Merida, but I don't feel ready to move on from Mexico. I'm realizing, as in the US, just how large this country is and how much more it has to offer. And as a slow traveler, it's really appealing to me to stay in the geographic region. Unless I really don't like the location, I would much rather delve a little bit deeper. If I wasn't staying in Mexico, there's a huge chance that I would still choose someplace in Central America, definitely Latin America, for my next location, because I'm really enjoying the culture that I've seen so far. And this is also one area of the world that I've never been to. I've traveled to Japan, various parts of Europe, and even a little bit in Africa. And so I do feel like this region of the world is just someplace I don't know very well, and I would love to learn more. So that's my first question. Am I done with the current location? And then what is it I'm searching for? What's the feel? What's the vibe? What's the change that I'm hoping for in the next location? I do want to put a little caveat on here that in all of this, I also take into consideration Alex. In every single move, Alex is almost never ready to leave at the same time that I am. He's almost always wanting to stay longer, but also understanding that when we were in the military, it wasn't really a choice. And even now, he just understands that his mother is a traveler. We are going to move. And so he kind of just deals with it, letting me know maybe some of the requirements he has for the next spot. But in terms of true readiness, Alex could probably stay in Merida another solid year without complaining. Are you excited for our next spot?
No.
Why?
Well, I mean, I might be, because I finally got a new set for my Lego videos.
A new set for your Lego videos?
Like, a new stage.
A new scenery. Got it. Got it, got it. Your Legos get to travel as well in your videos, okay? Anything else?
No.
That's mom life. And so like I said, I feel ready to move on from Merida, but not ready to move on from Mexico. So the next question is then, what am I looking for? What is the change? And top of mind, honest to goodness, is the weather. Merida is super hot. I think from last year, I kind of forgot how hot it can get, but also I was home a lot. Last year was during the height of the pandemic. We just didn't go out as much. And while I still hold that so long as you have shade somewhere, you'll be fine, I am really looking forward to being in a location where I don't have to constantly seek the shade. Like I want to be able to just go out when I want to go out, not worry about what time of day it is, and just just be. So different climate is mandatory right now. And the other thing I've been really missing since coming to Merida are mountains. I love the US, I love traveling the US because the majority of our country has gorgeous, gorgeous mountains everywhere, guys. And coming to the Yucatan is very, very flat. We really don't have any scenery aside from buildings and the sky. Like, that's the gist of what we're gonna see in terms of scenery. Yes, if you leave town, you can also see the amazing cenotes. You can see a jungle vibe, but in terms of my everyday, I see gorgeous buildings, I see sky and people, and I'm really in the mood for mountains. And last but not least, I'm also looking forward to a different vibe, and I think Vice going to a place that has a higher population, I kind of want to go to a place with a lower population. Having visited Valladolid, even though Valladolid has too much in common with Merida to make moving there a huge difference, although I'm sure that you will find a huge difference, I'm kind of looking forward to a place that's a little bit smaller than Merida. Merida has a population of about 900,000, close to 1 million, and I feel like a smaller location, a smaller population town would possibly make it a little easier / a little mandatory to get to know the locals even that much more. I'm also looking forward to a place that doesn't speak English quite as much, that doesn't enable me to speak English quite as easily. So I am hoping to improve my Spanish more by immersion, by being surrounded by others who only speak Spanish. A couple of the things that I do not want, I don't want a place that feels touristy. Now, I say that, I'm always going to be looking for an expat community, which means to a certain extent, I'm going to a touristy location. There's going to be tourists, there's going to be a transient vibe to it, and that is something that, so long as I'm traveling with my son, I'm probably never going to get rid of. I want to be in an area where we always have connections with an English-speaking group. It's part of the safety and security that I provide not only for myself but for my son. But I don't want such a touristy place that the entire location caters to Americans, right? I don't want a place that expects me to pay in US dollars. I don't want a place that off the bat assumes I only speak English and therefore they initiate all conversations in English. Merida, I think, is a really great international location. And quite frankly, we have a lot of English-speaking locals here that do enable those of us who are having trouble learning the language to continue not learning the language. And so the next spot I want to be a little less touristy than Merida. And again, I don't consider Merida necessarily touristy, but I think a smaller location might fit that vibe easily. The second thing is I am not a beach person. It's just something I know of myself. So yeah, I don't want to go anywhere with a beach. And last but not least, I will probably always be a budget traveler. So I do want my budget to be the same or smaller than what I currently have in Merida. Some logistical things that I absolutely require is internet. I earn my living online, not just with YouTube, but with other freelance type jobs. And so having access to internet is vital. Tying in with that is, of course, reliable electricity, having a safe place to work, and a certain level of quiet. Now, I'm gonna caveat that with Merida, for example, has loud moments, but at the end of the day, I'm absolutely able to work. So long as I can find some time where external noises aren't going to override my voice, we should be good. Because I'm choosing to stay in the country I'm already in, I've been in Mexico for 1.5 years, I'm continuing to stay in Mexico, there are some logistical requirements that I already know Mexico meets that maybe you will want to consider if you're coming to Mexico for the first time or any country for the first time. So, number one, what are your visa options? As somebody from whatever country you are from, how long are you able to stay as a tourist? How long are you able to stay as a temporary resident or a full-time resident? And just know each country has its own variety of visas. Not every country has the same types of visas. So you do have to, for every country that you're considering, look at the visa entry requirements. And if you're a single mother, you need to also look at those requirements. Traveling with a child, traveling with only one parent, because again, each country has slightly different rules. This is where really understanding your divorce or custody paperwork come into play, and contacting your local consulate may be a really smart idea. So Mexico, for example, has a tourist visa, which allows me to stay 180 days. There are other countries where on a tourist visa, you can only stay 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, and then you have to leave the country. Some countries have a certain amount of time that you have to leave the country for, whereas other countries don't have any specified length of time. Mexico is one of those countries where they don't really specify how long you have to be gone in between each visa period, which is one of the reasons why people really love staying here on a tourist visa. It is a risk, just so you know. The I&M officer never has to let you in, and those of us that are constantly doing visa runs run a risk, honestly, of annoying the I&M officers who might feel that we really should be getting at least temporary residency, if not full residency, if we're gonna be staying in the country for long periods of time. And so these are things you need to know. Again, tapping into a community with boots on ground, right? Somebody from the country that you're going to, and being able to have that rapport really does become helpful, especially the longer you're trying to stay in a region. So I want to say this, when traveling with kids, especially traveling alone as a single parent with your child, there are some inherent risks, there are some flags that will occur where the immigration officer might not know if you're legally allowed to leave with that child. And so you want to give that I&M officer as many touch points, as many hints that no, I am absolutely within my legal rights to come here. Everything is okay. Nobody's gonna be angry with you for letting me into your country without the other parent. So how does this get accomplished? Well, number one is having, of course, your passports and whatever visa requirements you need, having copies of perhaps your divorce or custody paperwork. Ideally, you would get them translated. Mine are not translated. They are still in their original English, but it is considered smart to have them translated to the local language so that there's less confusion. There are lots of circumstances in which it might be nice to have paperwork from the child's father, a notarized paper, stating that he is absolutely okay with you taking the child to that country for a certain amount of time. Like having that paperwork, again, it just gives another touch point, another warm and fuzzy to that immigration officer so that he knows, okay, this is kosher. Coming to Mexico, I have never had to show my divorce or custody paperwork, and I've never had to show any documentation from my son's father saying I was okay to be there. However, I do have those documents, and I absolutely carry them with me. I make sure they're near all of my passports and other paperwork so that it's easy for me to pull out and go, yep, here's all the paperwork. Nobody's angry that I'm here. So I'll be honest that I think it helps that Alex sort of looks like me. Like, it doesn't look impossible that he's my child. If your child doesn't look like they're biologically yours, and isn't this just opinion? Like, there are absolutely kids who don't look like their parents. So it is some bias, but please understand, trafficking is an actual problem in the world, and trafficking with children is especially a huge problem. And so when people question us, we just want to take a breath and understand where they are coming from. You would hate it if somebody was easily able to take your child to another country, and so we want to keep that in mind as we're traveling with our child. They're covering their butt, they're making sure that child is protected. We just have to be okay with it. Other flags might be if you have a different last name than your child. When I got divorced, I specifically chose to keep my last name, my married last name. Why? Because it's the name of my child. I didn't want there to be a situation where when I show both of our IDs, both of our passports, when I go to pick him up from school, if somebody goes, how come you have a different last name? Let me make sure that you're allowed to pick up this child. Like, please stop. That's my child. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's something that you should have done or you need to do, but it is just one little thing that I took into consideration during my divorce. I'll also note that I actually did attempt to get temporary residency before coming to Mexico the very first time. The number one thing that made it difficult, not impossible, just difficult, is the way my custody paperwork is worded. It states that Alex's dad needs to know where he lives. Now again, I had notarized documents from his father that I showed the consulate saying that he was absolutely okay with our going to Mexico. It had the address of the Airbnb, it had my son's passport information, like all on the up and up, but I think the consulate, and this is the consulate in Georgia, maybe they were getting just a lot of situations where people were forging this document. Maybe they were having lots of, I'm not sure. I'm not sure the why, but they really wanted to speak to his dad. And the biggest problem is that he lives in a different state. And while they were super reasonable, they didn't need him to come all the way to Atlanta. They were okay with him simply going to the local consulate near him. I was really uncomfortable with asking that huge favor of him, especially when I didn't know at the time if I even wanted to stay in Mexico for more than 6 months. So I honestly decided not to bother with it, go to Mexico, see if I even like it. So I do still play with the idea of possibly getting temporary residency. I just know that for me, the easiest way to make that happen would probably be I go to my ex-husband's state and then we go to the consulate together. Like, I think that would show beyond a doubt to the consulate that we are both okay with this decision. I just don't know when I'm gonna schedule the time to make sure that we're all available to be there at the same time. But anyway, back to my point. Look up the visa requirements for entry and specifically look at what are the requirements for entering this country with a minor child. Is there anything special you need to do? It's important to know, one, what your plans are in terms of schooling your child. How are you going to make sure they're educated? And will the country you're going to support it? And so while most countries are definitely okay with a tourist educating their child through their home countries, like you brought all the things and you're legally covered in the US for the type of schooling that you're choosing for your child, not all countries are okay with various homeschooling methods. And so it does become important to, once again, tap into perhaps a homeschooling or parenting group within that country so you can ask them, hey, what are you guys doing for school? What are the requirements? Am I able to school my child the way I want to, whatever that is? So whether you are, again, remotely educating your child through your public schools, maybe your child is part of an online academy, maybe you're homeschooling with curriculum, maybe you're unschooling. Whatever your method is, make sure that the country you're going to is okay with it. Again, this can sometimes take a little bit more research, just as in the US. Sometimes you do a quick Google, does Florida let you unschool? The short answer is no, but there are many, many ways to unschool. There are many, many similarities that unschooling has to traditional homeschooling, and you are allowed to homeschool in Florida. And so sometimes that takes a little bit of work to dig up. Again, staying connected with local communities will really, really help expedite your research process. And last but not least, I would recommend doing some type of Google search or YouTube search on things tourists need to know or culture shocks for that country, because there are sometimes really big shockers. Some countries really have very different cultures and very different laws for what the consequence for breaking those laws or breaking those norms may be. And you don't want to find yourself in a situation where using somebody's Wi-Fi without permission equals a $10,000 fine. Like, that's just stuff you want to know before you enter the country. Although, as you look up these shockers, as you look up these laws that may or may not blend very well with your particular lifestyle, always remember your why. Why are you traveling? What is the thing you're getting out of this visit, this travel, this stay? And if it's to learn more about the world, to learn more about your fellow humans, I say it's worthwhile to at least visit for a short period of time, even if that country has just a lot of really different rules. And so, of course, I've already chosen my next destination, and in the next video, I will let you know not only where that is, but what my first steps are once I've established that it meets, or I think it might meet, everything on my checklist. It's entirely possible that once I arrive at the new location, I realize maybe the internet at my Airbnb is not as stable as I need it to be, and I might have to move, or I might decide that, nope, this is a citywide problem, and this location simply will not work. Like, everything comes with a little asterisk that says it may or may not work for you. And so when choosing my next destination, when going there, it's never with the idea that I have to stay a year or 6 months. I might only stay for a month. I might stay for 2 years. We will never know until we get there. But the next video We'll talk about where I chose and the first steps once I have a warm fuzzy that it will meet my requirements.
Can we work it out? Only time will tell. It's gonna take a lot, 'cause we've been through hell. I can't be without you. I've tried and I failed. So can we work it out? Only time will tell. Why do you keep telling me nothing?